All right. It is just after 10 a.m. Give everybody just a moment to get logged in and we will get ready to begin. This is our second in our series of conversations with educators, our curriculum series actually. And today we are talking about strategies for monitoring student learning. We're happy to have you this Monday morning. I'd just like to spend a few moments talking about our agenda for today. Sorry, my slides typically will jump just a few times. And so today, this is our basic agenda for today. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. We're so excited and blessed to have her with us this morning. And then we are going to spend a segment of time talking about our guiding question, which is how we monitor the planning and delivery of instruction to ensure student progress toward mastery. There is a lot to unpack there. We're really excited to spend some time doing that this morning. And then we also have a segment of time set aside for some live Q&A. So please, as we listen and enjoy our time here this morning, if you have any questions, please just pop them in the chat. And we'll be able to ask those questions during that live Q&A session, or if there's a brief pause during our session this morning, we'll be able to ask those and get that conversation going. Okay, so like I said, we are so excited to have with us this morning Kellie Puderbaugh. She is the Director of Learning Services at Independence USD 446 in Independence, Kansas. She is incredibly well-versed on our topic this morning, and you are going to be so excited to hear what she has to share. We are just, honestly, we're going to grow and learn so much with her this morning. So, Kellie, thanks so much for joining us, and I am going to try to get a slide to go just once instead of 6 times as I let you take it away for us this morning. Okay, thanks so much, Kellie.
Hi, thanks. As shared, as Lisa shared, I'm Kellie Puderbaugh, Director of Learning Services for USD 446 in Kansas, Independence, Kansas. We're a school district of about 2,000 students. And the question, how do you monitor the planning and delivery of instruction to ensure student progress toward mastery, kind of seemed right up our alley. I'm going to share my screen here, but I think you will have to stop sharing, Lisa, for me to share.
There we go.
So what I wanted to talk about to start with regard to this topic was really about what we do to give the teachers the tools that they need to be able to plan good instruction that's going to lead to student mastery. And so we spend a lot of time with our teachers, new teachers in the district. Our mentors work with our new teachers around our instructional framework. And our instructional framework, what you're seeing on here, the graphic is kind of our guiding principles here in our district that we think there are 3 things that are critical to students being engaged in high-level learning for success, and that's relationships. So I think it was Rita Pearson who said, kids don't learn from people they don't like. Relationships are pretty important, and not so much that kids need to like all of their teachers, but they do need to have the type of relationship where they respect what they're being taught. We believe that learning needs to be relevant. And so how do we engage students in hands-on learning to make what they're learning seem relevant to their lives and to the futures that they want to have? And then finally, rigor, higher order thinking, really working with our teachers to help understand how to get kids to those higher levels of thinking. As you look at this document, and I could share this to be shared out if anybody's interested, but you'll see that we have a table of contents here, and it's clickable where you can go to any section. But the rigor relevance framework is something that as a district we adopted quite a number of years ago, and it's Daggett's work with the International Center for Leadership and Education. And basically, this should look very familiar to educators in the room. You know, this is Bloom's taxonomy. going all the way from the lowest level thinking to the highest level of thinking. And then across the x-axis here then is application, from its lowest levels of application all the way to real world application. And as I talk about this with our teachers, I help them understand that you're going to build lessons that have kids in all of these different quadrants, but the goal is always to get kids to this quadrant as often as possible. So there is going to be that direct teaching where students just have to acquire the knowledge, and sometimes getting them to apply that in a real world kind of way, but still low levels of thinking is less threatening to them. But eventually you do want them thinking at deeper levels and working with that, interacting with that content deeper. And then finally, we call this the you do, the students are doing the work in this quadrant, where they are thinking very deeply and working very deeply with the content at a real world kind of level. Our document kind of goes into defining for teachers what is rigor, what is relevance, but then it leads them into a design for curriculum and instructional planning. And in our district, we utilize the workshop model, which basically is that every lesson plan has 4 distinct parts. There's the opening, the instructional time, the work time, and the closing. But the opening and the closing obviously fall at the points in the lesson that they sound like. The opening happens at the beginning of the class period. It's usually a 10 to 15 minute piece of time. And for older instructors in the room, it might take you back to that anticipatory set. How do you get kids ready for the learning? The closing is very intentional. And as a classroom teacher, I was just as guilty of the next person of the bell catching me unaware, and then very quickly trying to help the students wrap up their learning before they leave. I make a point of explaining to teachers that the closing isn't putting your chairs on your desk and lining up at the door. The closing is an intentional way to wrap up the learning, whether that's with an exit ticket to give the teacher some data, whether that's preparing students for where they're going next with the learning. And then the instructional and the work time is a fluid piece of the middle part of the lesson. You may spend time instructionally, really making sure that students have the knowledge they need to be able to do what it is that you need them to do, but also very intentional. We want them to have work time. We want them, we want teachers to intentionally build in time for students to work with and interact with the content that they've learned, so that the teacher can evaluate that they have what they need to successfully accomplish the task. We've all heard, as teachers that it's not good to send a kid home to do 20 math problems wrong. And the amount of time it takes doing the math problem right and correcting the damage that was done by doing 20 math problems incorrectly takes more time than just building in the time to make sure that we know that they understand the content. The work time is also that opportunity to provide some differentiated instruction, some small group instruction, or even pulling the class back together as a whole group when you recognize that there's some real content pieces missing. And so as you go through our document, it starts with teacher planning. That again, we talk about the very intentional process of planning a lesson that's going to be successful. And we all know that we can be very intentional about planning and still have a lesson flop. But the more intentional you are about planning, the less likely that's going to occur. And so things that we want them on the left side of this chart are things that we want the teacher to be thinking about. How do you create a positive, safe learning environment? How do you create a learning environment that promotes higher order thinking? So really building in those opportunities for higher level thinking. And then on the right side of the chart, what are the expected outcomes? What are the expected behaviors and the expected learning outcomes from the students if we have accomplished what's on the left side? As you work on through this document or this section, you'll see that we give a brief overview of what is the opening, what's happening there, what is the teacher doing, what is the student doing, and what are some specific higher order thinking strategies that might work well in that particular amount of time. And we go through instructional time, work time, and closing. Notice that closing is kind of, it's defined as expanding and reflecting. Self-reflection is a really good thing for students to be able to do in the closing to wrap up their learning with a particular lesson. So the design for curriculum instructional planning, that workshop model for lesson design, is something we spend a lot of time on with our new teachers, that our mentors spend time with new teachers on, and that we as instructional leaders are looking for when we walk into the classroom. So we do have, a sample lesson in there, and what our protocol is for our new teachers with regard to lesson planning. Our new teachers are required to use Embarc for lesson planning, and that is because we want our new teachers new to the district, not just brand new teachers to the profession. We want them interacting with the curriculum that first year that they're writing lesson plans, and really utilizing that curriculum to build those lesson plans. No better way to learn and teach the curriculum with fidelity than to be accessing it every time you're writing a lesson plan. I talked about inspecting because I think that's an important part to ensuring student progress toward mastery, inspecting what we expect. We have classroom walkthroughs, and there are components by each building because our classroom walkthrough is built specific to each building. That way they can build in the opportunity to inspect individual building goals that are helping accomplish our strategic plan. But in addition to that, let me close that for a second and pull up this Elliott tool. We are a Cognia district, so we utilize Cognia to help us with our accreditation process. And this is the Effective Learning Environments Observation tool. And this is, while our walkthroughs for our principals are 5 minutes in length. And when you look at the walkthroughs in that document that I just had pulled up, you'll notice that those are all things that they can inspect within 5 minutes, get in, get out. And then we expect our building leaders, we use a 3x3 approach, which means we expect them to be in every teacher's classroom at least 3 times in 3 weeks. So we have 2 building leaders per grade span in our district. So they might be splitting that up, but that means about 20 to 25 teachers. They are getting into their classrooms for at least 5 minutes once every week. So those are the walkthroughs. Now the Elliott is a 20-minute visit. And so the district leadership, myself and our assistant superintendent and our superintendent would use this tool as we go into classrooms, and we're going to stay longer with this tool. We're going to stay for 20 minutes when we go in, and we're going to be looking at all of these different areas: equitable learning environment, high expectations environment, supportive learning environment, active learning environment, progress monitoring, well-managed learning environment, and digital learning environment. So those are the key areas. And basically what we're looking at in the Elliott is we're looking at student behaviors, that if these things are incorporated well, then we're going to see these student behaviors. And so as you look through the different components of this walkthrough, you'll notice that it's focused on what the learners are doing and how the learners are behaving. So the Elliott and the walkthroughs are one way that we try to make sure that we're monitoring progress towards student mastery. We also, we utilize as administrators Embarc. In fact, I just put out, once a year at the beginning of the year, I remind our principals, how do you use Embarc to project the curriculum onto a calendar so you get a general idea of what should be happening in the classroom. We also, I show them how do you look up lesson plans in BYOC. So when you're doing those observations, we use the McCrell observation process. When you're doing those observations on a particular day for a particular hour, how do you look those lesson plans up and know what in general should be happening? Our building principals are allowed to have whatever process in place they want to have in place for providing lesson plans. Most of our building leaders require that lesson plans are visible when they come into the room, and they have a place that they expect lesson plans to be. Most of our principals, I think, would say that they check lesson plans at least weekly, probably more so at the elementary level. Secondary might be a little less often than that. They're also looking that guiding questions and learning goals are posted on the board. We want, when we walk into the room, we want it to be an atmosphere of learning. And that's that those learning goals being posted on the boards hold students accountable, but they also hold all of the teachers and the support staff that may need to be there helping understand what's our goal today. So giving the teachers the tools that they need is the first part, I think, of making sure that students can plan, or that teachers can plan instruction that's going to lead to good student learning and mastery. Of course, we spend a lot of time talking about data in our district. We participate in our state's interim assessments, which happen 3 times throughout the year, that give teachers really good feedback with regard to where our students are at compared to other students in the state with regard to mastery of grade level standards. We use a number of different screening tools, Lexia Core 5, Reading Plus for some of our reading initiatives, iExcel for a math initiative, Dibbles to help us understand where students are at reading proficiency wise. And we have early release collaboration on Wednesdays, and at least a third of those Wednesday topics are dedicated to curriculum and deep data dives. So what is the data telling us? What do we need to do with our instruction? And then what does that mean with regard to curriculum? Are there adjustments that need to be made to the curriculum? Of course, our evaluation process is also a huge part of monitoring student progress towards mastery. We're in the classrooms at least 4 times a year, and oftentimes more, for formal evaluations of students of teachers who are up for evaluation. Our teachers write a data narrative at the end of each year. So they have identified 3 sources of data that they want to examine and inspect. And in those data narratives, they are telling us, what does the data tell you? And how does it inform where you're going to go next with it? And that becomes part of their professional development plans and ongoing evaluation. So I think I'm close on the 15 minutes. And so I want to stop for a second and find out if there are questions or things that I need to answer.
Perfect. Yes. So we do have just a few questions, and I just want to say firstly, thank you so much. That was amazing information, very thorough. I especially appreciated the relationship piece, as well as a few of the pieces of information about how you talked about the integration of blooms and the idea of content, how you present it as being less threatening for kids in the variety of sectors. How you utilize data in so many different ways, and where to go, and all of the evaluation pieces, very thorough and very good information. So few pieces of information, or sorry, a few questions. Do you, let me look first here. Firstly, this question, we said earlier, there's a lot to unpack here, but mastery can be defined in so many different ways. Do you find that that needs to be defined differently in different areas or grade levels, or for even different students? And how, if so, how do you happen to do that?
Yeah, master's tricky because teachers across a content area have to have a similar understanding of what mastery looks like. And so having ongoing conversations across the content area are definitely going to be important for making sure that we have a good understanding of what mastery of grade level standards are. Our state provides a number of documents that help us really unpack and understand the standards at different levels, and have provided documents that help us see what is it slightly below proficiency, what does it look like slightly above proficiency. But I also, if you will unshare your screen, I'll share.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not a sales pitch, but just sharing the things that we do in our district. One of the things that we find really helpful is we utilize STAR, which is a Renaissance product. And they talk a lot about this particular year, some training that we did on focus skills. And they have actually provided, and I believe that this is open to everybody, but a site that you can go to where they have crosswalked every state's standards with the focus skills that they've identified in STAR, so that when you are using those instructional pieces that they have in STAR, you know where and how they're connecting to your state standards. And this is a slide where they just basically helped us understand what is a focus skill. And so as we looked at this, we were asked to identify which of these are focus skills. And pretty quickly, and I'm not giving you the time to do that, but you'll see that I and J have a whole lot of lines coming off of them. They're so connected that if you take out, in fact, J, the whole web would collapse. So that's how they're identifying those focus skills that lead to other skills. And then there is this site that they have developed where you can go and actually see the focus skills, like here is Kansas. And so you can see how many focus skills has STAR identified for each state. And then you can click into it and start to see exactly what are those focus skills by the standard domains and all of that. So that's just one of the things we do in our district with regard to, let me stop share, with regard to that conversation around what is mastery. There are a lot of reports in there in STAR that really help us identify where our students are at with regard to mastery of each strand or piece of a standard, and then where they're expected to be by the time they get to the end.
That's incredible. So along those lines, and similarly, when you are planning for curriculum development, and even as far as the beginning, when you're first starting out that planning process, do you consider how instruction will be delivered as far as do you need to increase or decrease speed due to mastery, like if it happens really quickly, or if remediation is going to be needed? Do you build in pacing, and if a remediation is needed, do you have remediation plans in place already, or how does that look, teacher to teacher, content area to content area, things along those lines?
We do have a number of tier 2 and tier 3 supports in our district, or our elementaries are school-wide, title school-wide, and our middle school is targeted assistance. Our high school has a reading specialist, and we have a class that students can be pulled into if the data indicates that they need it. But with regard to just tier 1 instruction and building curriculum, I have always instructed our teachers, our curriculum teams, that a 9-week course is going to have about 7 to 9 weeks worth of content, understanding that there are going to be, some things take longer. If they always take longer, then let's go ahead and make that adjustment to the curriculum, because we haven't built a realistic timeline. But if this is just this particular group of kids that is causing us to have to massage the schedule a little bit, we've built in a little bit of room there. If it's a semester course, I recommend 15 to 18 weeks. And if it's a year-long course, I recommend 32 to 36 weeks of content, understanding that then allows them some leeway to extend things where they need to extend things. I always caution them from having 36 weeks of content for a 36-week course, unless they are building in that time into the units and the topics. I do have content areas, like my science department, for example, at the high school. They like to build in a unit for the final, because the final is going to be a whole week worth of review and or testing. And so they build in a finals unit. So their scope and sequence is very, very real, in that they've built in the time for those kinds of overages. In other departments, they're allowed that leeway of how do we not scheduling 36 weeks of content for a 36-week course, so that there is some room for some changes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Answered your question, but
yeah, absolutely, yes, thank you. Okay, it looks like we have perhaps 2 more questions at this point. Do you have any favorite instructional strategies? Do you use a particular provider? Do you give instructional strategy suggestions to your teachers? Do you have any favorites?
Yes, I do. And if you'll let me share my screen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Show you a couple of things that I'm a Kagan person. Kagan
Yes.
changed my life when I was in the classroom. And so one of the things that I do, because Kagan is very proprietary, is I demonstrate Kagan in everything that I do when I am doing teacher workshops. I name the strategy and I use the strategies so that my new teachers are getting practice with that. I talk the strategies with them. And so this is just a PowerPoint that I've put together of some of the strategies. But another really particular favorite of mine is this graphic, this framework for 21st century learning, mainly because I think it helps provide specifics to something that is very generic. I think when we hear the term 21st century learning, everybody nods. And then I'm like, so what is that? Well, you know, like computers and stuff. And it is computers and stuff, but it's more than that. And so this graphic, I think the reason I like it is because, okay, here's that computers and stuff. But then here's learning and innovation skills, the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. And here's life and career skills. Here's that relevant learning, right? And each of these pieces have an equal piece around 21st century themes. And so I don't know that it's a particular strategy, but an understanding of what is 21st century learning and how do we build that into every lesson plan.
That's wonderful and very pertinent for today's generation for sure. Okay, I believe this is our last question. So with today's climate and you know, it seems like we have a dramatic influx of new teachers, and sometimes those new teachers are not necessarily, they haven't come through the traditional channels into the classroom. Do you focus on a particular aspect of your framework when you're showing them your lesson planning framework or your processes? Is there one particular part or a few parts that are more important than the others as they're learning the curriculum framework, or they're getting their feet wet? Is there something that you feel like is more important than anything else?
So we spend a lot of time in our new teacher orientation talking about the rigor relevance framework. We think it's important for them to understand those 4 quadrants and how you get kids to different levels of thinking. And you would see in our walkthroughs that some buildings actually use Costa's levels of thinking, which is an AVID thing because we are an AVID district as well. Same kind of concept. It's about getting kids to higher levels of thinking and engaging with that content in a real world kind of way, in a relevant way for them. So that's a big focus. The lesson plan design is a huge focus for us. We spend quite a bit of time inspecting. I have a whole list of sample type things, and I ask them to identify which part of the lesson that falls in. We spend quite a bit of time talking about what good planning looks like, because none of that happens without good planning. And then finally, there's a part of our framework that we've started to focus on more now, especially post-pandemic, and that's family engagement, parent engagement. And so at the end of our framework, we do have a section where we talk to them about just very simple strategies for getting parents and families engaged and keeping them engaged throughout the year. So those are probably the biggest highlights that I front load from, before they even walk into a classroom.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing. This was
Absolutely.
incredibly enlightening. I'm overwhelmed, honestly, by your curricular knowledge. It's fantastic to hear from a professional. I will say just quickly before we close that as far as EAI is concerned, we do have a suite of products. We would be delighted to help with any operational efficiencies that we can. Anybody that's on the line, we're always happy to help save time and money for any school district. And if you have any questions regarding anything that you heard today, Kelly did say she's willing to share resources. I do have a copy of a few of them, but we are happy to help in any capacity. And so please feel free to reach out. And we hope you have a lovely day. Thanks so much for joining us today. Kelly, thank you again for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye, y'all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.